All right, you should be seeing my screen. So today I'm gonna talk about a product design studio pilot and what that is. So my name is Pedro Moreira da Silva, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm a staff product designer, and I'm also a maintainer of the Pajamas design system. And I've been at GitLab for some time now and worked in many areas of the product. And I'm based in Lisbon, Portugal. So where is the gap in our design collaboration? So usually what we do in design at GitLab is, we collaborate and we have this sense of belonging that look a little bit like this. You're sprinting in your stage group, following the roadmap, and you don't look a lot, to your left or to your right. You're more on your own, and only now and then you cross paths with someone else and ask for their feedback, collaborate to help you sprint faster, I guess. And we don't have a lot of touch points for design collaboration. Or maybe we do, but we don't have them in the right location, or we don't have enough of them. So I'm going to share with you this very, very scientific matrix of design collaboration touch points that I put together. So yeah, take this with a grain of salt. So two axes, the x-axis is from a one-on-one setting to a public setting, and the y-axis is being from formal to informal. So on one side, we have the UX showcases, comments, issues, merge requests, discussions on gitlab.com. We have also the UX weekly call, and it is more on the formal or structured side of things, and it is more on the public spectrum. And then below that, more informal, less structured, we have Slack and Slack channels, where it includes our UX co-working channel, for example. And Figma, it was a little bit harder to place, but I feel like it can be as formal as discussing something on gitlab.com, but usually it's in a smaller setting, even though most of the work we do is public, and even some Figma files are public. It sometimes feels a little bit more close and more one-on-one. We then also have team design syncs, usually organized by stage or stage group. Many of them are led by the managers, the product design managers. But still they can be a little bit more formal because they are usually oriented towards work and combine some preparation, the group setting, and also the presence of the manager. And we have also, of course, the one-on-ones with the manager and a one-on-one with a peer, like your pair designer. But the sweet spot, as you might have already guessed, is that in that bottom half. And I think the sweet spot for collaboration definitely includes a more informal and smaller setting. And so this is where the product design studio experiment came to happen. And I was aiming for the informality of a one-on-one with a peer, but with the benefits of discussing topics in a small group. And so how does this actually work, right? So the goal, just to reiterate, is to have this small sync setting for social interactions and work discussion. And I believe that we can foster stronger personal and work relationships that ultimately, that crosses over to our async collaboration. So in essence, it is trying to replicate the product design studio atmosphere and, to think unstructured time for social, show and tell, feedback, and more. So our own product design studio. And this is not a new idea at GitLab. It's actually similar to how we did the UX weekly call when I joined in 2016, and we were just a handful of designers. So that worked back then. We also have a Hangouts call for UX every 2 weeks on Friday. I don't know how many people joined that call. I don't know if you joined them, but we have that on the calendar. And Alex Fracaso, he is hosting a UX sync in APAC that is also more on the social side of things. So it's not a new idea, but I think what I want to highlight from here on is that with the product design studio calls, I knew exactly what I wanted to be different and be more intentional about it. So how about a pilot? So it was the most boring solution. It was just bringing the designers that are usually in the EMEA time zones, so 7 of us, bringing them together for 4 weeks, once a week, and just seeing what happens. It was just being boring and in my mornings. So it was trying to make it as effortless as possible for me to get it going. But there were some key considerations that I had before we even started the pilot. So the first one was actually using the time zones as a healthy constraint. So instead of having challenge to try to find a good time for everyone, as we have that challenge with the UX weekly call, or even when you want to collaborate with designers in your stage or section, it's difficult to find a good time because people are in different parts of the world. So if we use the time zones and align to that, it will naturally lead to a diverse audience with designers from different areas of the product. And also at the same time, we're respectful of others' time, which is one of our efficiency operating principles, so that people can pick the time that works best for them in their working day. Maybe you're a morning person, or maybe you're an evening person, or you have conflicts, in your schedule. So you have to navigate around that. I also wanted to make it democratic, so not having any blockers to contribute and feel included. So one thing that I intentionally did was to not invite managers. And we have a few of them in the EMEA time zone, but I intentionally did not invite them because I wanted to test this hypothesis that having just peers on the call would reinforce building direct relationships among the designers. And I know that some people are just not affected by the manager's presence, but others are much more affected. And so I really wanted to avoid that tendency that people naturally have to look for higher ups for direction. And in the same way that everyone can contribute, I wanted to make sure that everyone was contributing, right? And for that effect, I put all of the work on myself, not on the participants. So there was no preparation required. They just needed to show up. And actually, it wasn't that much work to put it together. And I hope that the work that I had could be used in the future by others. But yeah, just no preparation, just join, have fun, talk about work, know each other. That's it, basically. And part of this is actually being an active facilitator and moderator. So you have to be very, you look very carefully at the cues that people give during the call to make sure that everyone is contributing and everyone is heard. And this, of course, does not apply just to this pilot, but any kind of meeting or workshop or group discussion that you lead. Then the rotating structure. So I wanted to balance some predictability with diversity, but I didn't want it to become monotonous and always have the same structure. And people were already thinking, oh, this is what's going to happen on Wednesday, and I already know what's going to happen. But I also didn't want it to be completely different every week. So we actually were rotating the structure and what we were discussing every other week. And I think that was good. And I'm also going to show a few examples of how we rotated other things in the call. And finally, and I think most important of all, I wanted to create this feedback loop. I wanted to seek everyone's feedback about the call, what was working, not working, what we could improve, so that I could iterate on the format of the call on every instance. And that actually worked really well. And I'm going to share the results with you in a minute. So how did it actually look like, the pilot? So for the structure, we had 2 main moments. The first one, the icebreaker. And you can see here on these amazing drawings, and feel free to try to guess what they are in the chats, but we had a lot of fun with different icebreaker moments. And we actually, this is something that worked really well, was to have a different host every time. So every week I asked a different designer to be the host of the icebreaker moment. And they all came up with different surprises and then different things for us to do. And it's actually not a lot of work because, I mean, it's a little bit of work, but it's work that brings you joy, I guess. And it's for a fun moment. So you don't see it as work. And sometimes this was just a link to join a, Drawasaurus or something like that. And that was really good. And the second moment is work topics. And for this, we were rotating between two things, the water cooler. And for the water cooler, 1 week, we were just having prompts about how we work. An example of that, as you can see here in this screenshot on the right, was, for example, can you share any challenges you've encountered in your work lately and how you've overcome them? Have you come across any particular inspiring design examples recently, either within or outside our industry company? So that was the water cooler, and we did that every other week. And then we rotated that with the workboard, which was to share what you were working on. And for both of these things, we were using Google Docs features like the timer and voting, as you can see in the screenshot. So you had 5 minutes to add one or more items, and then we would vote on what we wanted to learn more about or discuss or give feedback on. So this is, again, bringing the democratic participation into the document and not having people prepare things beforehand. And a good outcome of this, and if you've seen the latest UX retrospective, is that we were able to discuss things in more depth or with more room that you normally have in an unstructured way. And I was able to summarize some of the thoughts and sentiments and share that with others and with leadership in the UX retrospective. So that's a good use case of this. And we could also use this time for deep dives into a specific work item if someone wants to do just a critique of what they're working on, or even help shape the narrative of their next UX showcase. So if you want to share the MVC of what you're going to present in an UX showcase. So what did we learn? So overall, the satisfaction was very high. So people were satisfied or very satisfied with the format of the call across all 4 instances. We had a good alignment with the goals. So the goals here that I wanted people to see if they agreed or not were if the topics were relevant to their role or projects, if the meeting was effective in fostering stronger personal and work relationships, and if they felt encouraged to participate during the meeting. And overall, most people agreed or strongly agree with that. And also another agreement question was whether they felt like there were moments enough to network and interact with others, and if the icebreakers were helpful. And again, most people agreed or strongly agreed with that. So there are a bunch of positives with this, like the formats work really well with the combination of social interaction and work discussions, the collaborative aspect of the agenda document, the setting, and also the variety of this rotation of icebreakers and discussion topics. There were definitely a few things to watch out for, which I think you could apply to any group discussion situation. But I wanted to call them out here because they were really important. So one is trying to keep the icebreaker under 15 minutes. We were having a ton of fun. So sometimes it went over a little bit and we didn't have as much time for the work topics. The participation was really an active duty from my part as the host to really empower everyone to contribute and give the time and space for people that don't speak as much to have that time and call them in and ask them if there's anything they want to say. And also to try to ensure we have diverse topics in participation. And an example of that was that we had Dan and Sasha. So Dan from working in foundations and Sasha from the UX paper cuts team. And most of the things that they were wanting to share, I mean, it resonates with everyone on the call because they work on foundational and broad, projects that touch on many, many parts of GitLab. So everyone wanted to hear about them, but I had to take a strong stance on sometimes diverting people's attention to another topic that maybe is not as attractive on the surface or is more in a niche area of the product, but to actually, ensure that we have a diverse participation and opinions from others. So a lot of opportunities that I hope we can continue to explore in the future. So one is, what if we actually rotated the hosts? So for these calls, I was the host. What if other people took my place and we were rotating this role so that other people could develop their skills and also to share the workload? So that could be a good idea. The group size, we were 7 invited in total. I think most of the time we were 6 people, but I think a group size of 4, maybe 5 could be the sweet spot. The frequency, we were meeting weekly. Is weekly good? Maybe every other week? I don't know, really. And finally, someone suggested in the survey, the feedback survey asked for a grant for good coffee. So maybe we need some incentives to keep this going. Yeah, that's joking, of course. And what's next? So one thing that I thought about after actually building this presentation was, what if we actually try to improve the documentation on when to use what collaboration touchpoint for design? And we have some of this documented in the handbook, or at least some of those touchpoints. I know, for example, Figma, we have a nice table that tells you when you should use Figma or use our design management features in GitLab. But what about other touch points and when you should use what? And I think it's also important when we look at this very scientific matrix is to recognize that we have to recognize our diversity, inclusion, and belonging operating principles. So one is the bias towards asynchronous communication and also embracing neurodiversity, because we will need a diversity of touch points to accommodate how people like to work and think through problems. So some people prefer collaboratively, but others actually want to design alone and then share. And I think, to be honest, I think we so far have probably over-indexed on async and siloed work. And many people, many designers maybe on this call would actually prefer to have a little bit more collaboration touch points that are synchronous and that are more collaborative. So I think we need a diversity of those different types of communications, even though it should all go back and be recorded asynchronously in issues, like I was, exemplifying with UX retrospective and so on. And also it's important to these principles is to make these group calls optional to attend, so that people don't feel forced to join them if it's not their liking, right? And if it doesn't work. And so next, I'm hoping to see more product design studios worldwide so that we can connect with others at the time of the day that works best for them. And also a really interesting result of having more product design studios is that we can have, if you look at this map, imagine multiple feedback loops on each time zone. So it would allow us, if we have multiple hosts across the world, to learn faster about what's working or not working, which, for example, if you look at our UX weekly call, we just have one call once a week and one opportunity to learn and improve. What if we have more of these product design studios that allows us to learn faster? And again, the product design studios, just to clarify, is not a replacement of the UX weekly calls or anything like that. It is a complement to all of the other touch points that we have here. So yes, we want to extend the pilot, so we don't want to document it just yet. And I believe we have plenty of room to improve the format before it becomes a standard. And maybe the pilot will be here forever and it will always be treated as a pilot. So today we have 29 designers or product designers in the company. Maybe we're going to have more in the future. I'm sure we're going to have more. And not everyone will join them. But if we are aiming for that sweet spot of 4 to 5 people, we're going to need at least 6 design studios in different time zones. So if you want to develop your facilitation collaboration skills, if you want to help improve the format, volunteer to be a host. And there's a link there. And I want to thank Becca and Michael for being the first volunteers. And that's it. Obrigado, which is always saying thank you in Portuguese. And Special thanks to the real pilots of the pilots, Camelia, Dan, Julia, Sasha, Sanjung, and Tim. Thank you so much. We don't have time. Sorry, we don't have time for questions. So I'm going to hand it over to Annabel, and I'll try to respond async to the questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So hi, my name is Annabel, and I'm a designer on the UX Paper Cuts team, and I'm going to be walking through our recent reorganization of the user profile page layout. This was just a reorganization of the existing layout. We didn't introduce any new features, just shifted some of the stuff around. Before I get to those changes, I'm going to walk through kind of the history of the user profile as far as I could find. So in 2016, it looked something like this, and I got this from Wayback Machine. So it's kind of broken. It didn't look like this broken back then, but as you can see, we've got this centered content right here with the metadata, the picture, and then these centered tabs. The reason we had this kind of centered paradigm was because at that time we had an entirely centered navigation. So this is, again, 2015 or 16 maybe. We had the logo at the top, and then we had all of our contextual information here in 2 layers of tabs that were centered. And then we had like the global items back here behind this hamburger menu, which also sometimes looked like that. So at that point, we had centered navigation. We had centered project pages that looked kind of like this. Projects and groups shared this similar pattern, so it made sense that we did the same thing for user profile page. So it looked like this. Fast forward to about 2021, it's still centered, but at this point we had a completely different navigation, and we didn't have the centered tabs anymore. We had everything in a sidebar, not on the profile page, but on all the other pages. Everything was left aligned. The projects and groups had moved to the similar to what we kind of have now, where everything's left aligned, but the user profile page kind of got just left behind in that regard. So I mean, we're looking at 2021 here. Everything is still centered, including the tabs. 2024, I don't know when this happened in between these two screenshots. We did separate the top content a little bit, put the avatar in its own column, and then shifted everything else to the right. But the entire area is still centered. And the way this was grouped right here with all of the dots tended to be buggy at different screen sizes. It would wrap in odd ways occasionally, depending on how much content people were putting in their profiles. So this is how it looked. So really not many changes since 2016, at least, until recently, and this is how it should look now. This change landed on Monday on production. So how did we get to this layout? It actually all started, oh, and I also need to preface this, I'm not very organized, sorry. This is my presentation, but this was a huge collaboration for UX Paper Cuts. So me and Sasha and Julia all worked on this a whole lot. And the inspiration between the redesign and reconfiguration in general came from a design exercise that Jeremy did, which I will show right now. So this was, it says a year ago, but I think it was 2 years ago. Jeremy did this design exercise where he took that centered navigation and kind of the whole existing profile, which looks like this, and moved it into this column format. Easier to read, looks a lot cleaner than the existing one, but it never got picked up. So this kind of sat for 2 years. And by the time that we were able to start working on something like this, the new navigation had landed. And as you know, the new navigation has this left sidebar. So this design didn't really work anymore because we would have had a sidebar, and content. So using this as inspiration, we ended up with, let's see if I have the original merge request that we created in October of last year, where we put all the metadata on the left, the user content in this left column, and then the actual content of the user profile page on the right. And it kind of helps separate things, made it easier to scan, find the information you're looking for. And then this would be the main content. This worked fine, but it bothered me in particular, the jagged nature of the left sidebar compared to the sort of clean lines of the right. It also looked a little similar to competitor products. So we were trying to redesign or reconfigure this layout, make it cleaner and more modern without losing any kind of uniqueness that comes with being GitLab. So that's how we kind of ended up with this pattern, which is the title and the header content right at the top, and then the metadata on the right. And the reason we did this is to kind of mimic what we do across GitLab in general. So if you look at the newly redesigned project page, which was done by Michael Lee and Sasha, we've got the title up here, the avatar, and then the metadata on the right. And even if you look at any of the issuables like merge requests, epics, issues, we have the same kind of pattern. We've got the title at the top, and then we've got the metadata on the right. So it kind of made sense that we would also follow that general pattern. So that's kind of how we landed where we did. The merge request I just showed, where we had a slightly different look and feel. This is kind of the lessons that we learned along the way. So this was a merge request that we created. It got really big, and the developers were just like, no, we can't do this. This is way too big, way too many changes. And, you know, there's a huge possibility of regressions. So we closed it, and then I separated every single feature out into its own merge request. So I can kind of walk through what those changes are one by one. The first one was just the, oh, it's not opening the right tab. The first one was just kind of the main layout change. So you can see how it used to look and then what it ended up becoming. The second main change was our calendar and achievements. So before, achievements were just kind of floating under the user profile avatar, which meant that it didn't scale that well. We only showed 3 at a time. If you wanted to add more, there was really no room. We couldn't really make them bigger, and it didn't actually have a label either. So it was kind of hard to tell what these things were. And then the graph was different in that we showed the full thing, and then if you sized your screen down, we would chop off half of it and only show 6 months. And then if you continue to size your screen down, we would just remove it entirely from the page. We changed that by making the whole thing horizontally scrollable. Usually that's not, you know, the best UX principle, maybe, that kind of horizontal scrolling, but here it kind of made sense. We made sure to always make it shifted to the right, so you'll see the most recent dates first, and then as you set your screen down, you should stay on the right and it will show the whole calendar at all times, and we don't need to remove it at all on mobile. So that was a nice change. The README, this was a feature that someone added, and it's super useful, you know, when people want to know more about you, but it takes up so much space. And you can even see in these examples, I mean, this was a real, I'm picking on you, Jeremy, for the screenshot, but this is the standard size, well, standard, my 15-inch MacBook, I think that is, and this is what you see. You only see the README, and then you have to scroll down to see the rest of the content. And that was the case with, you know, pretty much all READMEs. You couldn't really see what was going on. So we set a max height on that, considered scrolling it. No one likes, you know, that little scroll box. So we added this read more link where you can click on that to expand the whole thing. Whoops. Another big change is card styles for projects. Previously, we showed them all in a list. Adding this card style helped group each item into its own sort of area. And visually on the page, it looks pretty nice when you see all the activity listed, and then you can see your project cards below. Ideally in the future, oh, it doesn't, this is an old screenshot too, so it doesn't look quite like this. Ideally in the future, we would allow users to pick the projects that they want to highlight. or at least maybe pick maybe if there's the most stars or something like that. But right now, I believe it's the most recently updated, or however we used to show them. I'm not sure. But that's something for a future iteration if people want to do that. And then the final merge request was the layout shift, which I can't open right now, but there, which you can see here. We shifted from the individual column into the sort of header and then on the right. And then there's examples with like a half filled out profile and then the empty profile, which still doesn't look great. But there's not much content there, so it's not gonna look that great. After that, we deployed it, or it was deployed on Monday, opened up an issue for feedback. And it seems to me, I linked the feedback issue in the agenda. The feedback has seemed to be mostly positive or neutral and no one noticed, which I think is pretty good, all things considered, because this is such a big change. The takeaways I have from this and learnings are that it's really important to split up merge requests earlier on. And it was a lot of work to split this. And in the future, we will be making sure to put these kinds of things behind feature flags. So every single one of those merge requests was merged into a feature branch. And then at the end, I asked the reviewers to review it again. And then that entire feature was put into master. In the future, we'll take all of these little branches that we had set, that I had separated, merge those into master, each of them behind the same feature flag, so that once all of them have made it into production, or all of them have made it into master, we can turn the feature flag on and test the whole thing again. That's not how it went. We did the feature flag thing, or we did the feature branch thing, and it ended up working okay. I pinged every designer's UX buddy that worked on these changes, and we did uncover some bugs, which was great. So we did get a lot of eyes on it. So thank you to everyone who had reviewed it and made sure that there weren't any bugs or inconsistencies. And yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. So feature flags, important. Let's do that next time. The reason I didn't push for that to begin with was because the profile page isn't like a core piece of GitLab. It's not a core piece of user profile or of users' workflows, really. It's not the merge request page or the issues page. It's not something that if it disappeared entirely for a day, workflows shouldn't be disrupted. So in my mind, I was thinking, this will be okay. It's just reconfiguring existing features. Nothing new was added or removed. We didn't remove anything from any of the tabs or anything like that. So there's definitely plenty to follow up with here if anyone was going to do that, or if Papercuts decides to do another milestone dedicated to this. But it's been a long time in the works since last October. And then as you've seen, Jeremy did that design 2 years ago. So I'm really excited it finally landed. That's kind of it. Maybe we can move on to questions. I don't have the agenda open, so if there are any,
I'll ask you a question as well. Well, if you could remove something, what would you remove?
Right now, if you scroll or if you go to any of the other tabs like personal projects, I don't remember what the tabs are, but if you go to any of them, we still have the header and we still have the sidebar. That's because that content was already there, but it doesn't really make sense and doesn't need to show up on every tab. So that would be nice. Oh yeah, snippets, star projects, all that stuff. Ideally also, it'd be great to combine those projects tabs. We've got contributed projects, personal projects, and starred projects, all as individual tabs. I'm not entirely sure if it's needed, but again, I don't have research to support that hypothesis. It just seems like it's not necessary. It'd be cool to remove that. It might be nice to do something with followers and following as well. I don't know what, but maybe that could go on the main profile page and we could remove it from the sidebar. I don't know. There are a lot of things we could do probably.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for sharing a few ideas. I agree with all those that you were suggesting.
Annabelle, I'm curious how Papercuts decides to work on what for each milestone and how you all decided to work on profile.
It's been a combination in the past of, what was it? Historically not touched areas, areas that we think don't have owners. In this case, they did have an owner after all. User or more popular areas. So like we worked on merge requests because they're the highest trafficked areas, issues, that kind of things, labels and lists. How else have we been doing it? And then I guess just passion projects. Like I knew Jeremy did this design 2 years ago and it never got implemented and I really wanted it to. So we were able to schedule it, a few months in advance and it finally got pushed through.
It's pretty cool to see what we had in 2016 and how it pretty much stayed the same all the way till now. So it's really awesome you guys had time to work on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember the old standard navigation? It was nice.
Yeah. Cool. I know you don't have the agenda up. It doesn't look like there's any other questions or comments, so we can maybe pass it over to Emily now.
I will share my screen. Awesome. Can everyone see the? Cool. So hi everyone, my name is Emily Bowman. I'm the senior product designer on the environments team, and I wanted to talk today about the importance of solving UX debt. So before we get started on this, I know UX debt is kind of like a term we've used quite a bit at GitLab, but as a refresher, UX debt results from the intentional decision to kind of deviate from the UX vision or MVC we've stated out in our issues. It often sacrifices a little piece of the experience for kind of speed of getting to the user. So this could be like a slightly bad visual on a smaller screen when you're testing screen sizes, a loading state that's not particularly perfect, an error message that comes up that could be improved that we've kind of gone forward with to balance that speed to production. So an example of this is I was working on one with feature flags where our error message that we came up with in the MR was just a generic something went wrong on our end, please try again. This error message isn't super clear, really just giving users the idea to kind of refresh the page and hope for the best. But because this came up kind of late in the MR review, we decided to move forward with it as is and open up a UX debt issue. So then when we opened that issue, we were able to say that this was an error with being unable to load the user list. So it kind of let them know where their error was and reload the page and try again. So users were able to complete the task with what we had before, but this is just really fixing up that experience and finding that error message going forward. So why does UX debt happen? So like I said before, sometimes it's a trade-off to get something of value to the user faster. These reasons can range from a whole bunch of things like designs not being properly evaluated by engineering, so that collaboration lacking a little bit at the start, or assumptions we've made and everything was agreed upon, but during implementation, someone found out something, we couldn't move forward with a portion of the design, and that changed and we had to make those trade-offs. We do our best here at GitLab to avoid UX debt as much as possible, but we have put together this process to solve it for when it does happen. And that's the importance of it, is kind of fixing it up and getting these better user experiences out there. So this is where I wanted to share the environment team's approach to this, because when I first joined the team, there hadn't been a designer on it was the release team back then, now it's environments, for quite some time. UX debt was not top of mind, so wanted to approach that in a different way. And I think we all know that the little things are really hard to prioritize. It's not as fun working on an error message, fixing up a loading state, as it is working on like a new feature. So sometimes you just have to make that extra effort and be cognizant of these things to actually get them in. So the first thing I really noticed is collaboration is key. When I joined the team, UX debt wasn't something engineers were really thinking about. Product wasn't really moving forward with it because it wasn't something we were chatting about in our day-to-day and milestone plannings. So the collaboration aspect, bringing UX debt front and center, was like a key ingredient in getting it prioritized and finished. So what I would often do here is I would review open UX debt issues during milestone planning. So I'd make a thread in the milestone planning issue, list out some of these and see if there were any we wanted to move forward with. For a little bit of time when we had a lot in our backlog, I would make an effort to add in at least one UX debt issue per milestone to get them complete. Now I just add them as they come up, now that we don't have that backlog. And we also encourage engineering to pick up at least one issue if possible, if they have the capacity to. And the other big thing is just UX debt awareness. So we have UX debt in the handbook, but it just seemed like in team processes, it wasn't something that was often talked about. So during team meetings, making an effort to bring up UX debt and the importance of solving it, adding a link to remind the team in the team's handbook page. And this one was really cool because as I was talking about it, one of the engineers actually went to our handbook page and made an update around UX debt without me asking or anything. So it was showing that the team was actively thinking about this. And again, working with product to prioritize issues as they come up. Another really good thing we found out is a lot of UX debt issues are very simple. They're like content changes, icon changes, adding in a loading state. So adding in that quick win label was a really easy way to get community members to pick them up. We also made an effort for engineering to refine these issues so that it was easy for community members to come in, read through the refinement, follow the steps, and finalize them. And then afterwards, when there'd be hackathons, this is also a great opportunity to kind of list out those issues in hackathons so that our community members could easily pick them up and help us solve our team's UX debt. So I wanted to share a bit about how this was going with our team. So when I first joined Release, and Release hadn't had a designer in quite some time, on our, I think it was the dashboard, it would show UX debt from open to close. Release was taking 700 days to close UX debt issues, which was a little bit much. That would have been like almost 3 years to close UX debt issues. So I put it on myself. I really wanted to improve this. And in November 2023, all UX debt issues were design complete for environments. We also made an effort to make this one of our team OKRs in the release. When I was on the release team, to close up UX debt and usability issues. So pushing that forward as an OKR really helped the team come together, get them all design complete, and start working on them. So now I wanted to share just like a few quick ones that we actually did solve. So one was adding a toast to deployment approvals when they were approved. So when we did put out deployment approvals, this toast wasn't initially there. People would hit approve and there'd be no visual indication deployments were being approved. And we heard this was really confusing. People would like refresh the page quite a bit. So this is a really good UX debt one that was so simple. It's just one little toast message, but it really improved the experience. Another few ones are adding error messages for when feature flag limits are reached. So before, if you reached your feature flag limit, there'd just be a disabled new feature flag button, no indication of why that button is disabled. So we wanted to add in first a banner message when you've reached your feature flag limit of what to do, as well as a popover on that new feature flag button when it's disabled, explaining why you couldn't kind of like click that anymore. And then another one is when we had designed the user list for feature flags. Initially, it was truncated, so you couldn't actually see the full list of users until you hit edit. But the problem there is not all users had the ability to edit these lists. So people who didn't have that visibility just couldn't see the full list of users. So this is another one we fixed up afterwards, and it made the experience better for everyone. So now, current situation is we have 5 open UX debt issues, and they are all design complete. So we're continuing to keep that as something important on our team as they come up, fixing them up and getting them ready either for our engineering team or other community members. So really, the takeaways from this is collaboration always wins. There's a lot that went into fixing this UX debt issue on the release team, but it really boiled down to working with the team, sharing the importance of these small usability problems, kind of educating on what UX debt is and getting everyone excited about that. The other thing followed that is, as a designer, being the advocate for UX debt on the team and celebrating the wins. So when we did close off all the UX debt issues or got all the UX debt issues refined, having that as something we celebrated within our team to move forward. And yeah, the next steps we want to do here is continue advocating for UX debt and then take steps to get our dashboard back up and running, because I believe that haven't been able to use that for quite some time. So figure out what's going on there and continue tracking UX debt. Cool. And before I end this presentation, I just wanted to ask, like, how much of a problem UX debt is in your teams? Is this something we think about? I'd love to hear about design wins or struggles with UX debt and see how we can kind of move this process forward. Cool. And that is my presentation. So stop sharing and open the agenda. I noticed Valerie has a read only, but Chad, oh, I think they're both read onlys. I don't know if anyone wanted to voice their read only comments or not.
I can, just to plug that there are some kinds of UX debt that might be a good issue to call in paper cuts on. If it's something where it's like, hey, we know what the implementation is for this, can someone do it in code because our team doesn't have capacity? Those might be good ones.
That's actually great, because we try and prep all of ours with like a refinement list of like how to make edits to them. So I think that combination would really make it easy. Awesome. Does anyone else have any other questions? If not, I guess, Tari, did you want, I wasn't sure if I was going to end this or.
Yeah, no worries. I can go ahead and stop the recording. Thanks, Pedro, Annabelle, and Emily for all sharing today. I really appreciate it.